Upon arriving to clean the luxury mansion, the maid froze when she realized that the millionaire was her husband who passed away 8 years ago. She approached, and Bethany Johnson's back ached as she hauled the cleaning supplies up the winding driveway of the Anderson estate. The morning sun glinted off the mansion's windows, almost blinding her as she approached the imposing front entrance. 8 years of scrubbing other people's homes had taught her to become invisible, to slip in and out without disturbing the lives of those who could afford to pay someone else to erase their messes. "You're the new one, right?" A silver-haired woman in an immaculate uniform opened the door before Bethany could ring the bell. Her name tag read, Ava. "Yes, ma'am, Bethany Johnson, Bethany. Oceanside Cleaning Services sent me." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing, "Well, you're on time. That's more than I can say for the last girl." She stepped aside. "Come in. I'll show you around." Bethany stepped into a foyer larger than her entire apartment. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they seemed to touch the sky. Marble floors echoed beneath her worn sneakers, making her acutely aware of how out of place she was. "Mr. Anderson is away on business," Ava explained as she led Bethany through corridors lined with artwork that probably cost more than Bethany would earn in a lifetime. "The staff quarters are through there, kitchen's that way, and the east wing is off limits today, being renovated." Bethany nodded, mentally mapping the layout. At each new room, her heart sank a little further. So much space, so much wealth. Her children shared a bedroom in their cramped apartment, while this place had rooms that probably hadn't been used in years. "You'll start with the library," Ava instructed, pushing open a heavy wooden door. "Dust everything, vacuum, polish the tables, don't rearrange any books." The library was breathtaking, 2 stories tall with a spiral staircase leading to a second level of bookshelves. A massive desk dominated one corner near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, the same ocean that had supposedly taken Nathan. "I'll be back to check on you in an hour," Ava said, closing the door behind her. Alone, Bethany allowed herself a moment to take it all in. Books lined every wall, some looking hundreds of years old. The ladder that slid along rails to reach the highest shelves reminded her of Nathan's dream library. He'd always said that when he made it big with his inventions, he'd build a library just like this. Pushing away the thought, she got to work. No use dwelling on dreams that died with him in that storm. She had 3 kids waiting at home, and Alexa's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. She was halfway through dusting the upper shelves when she heard the door open. "Ava, I'm almost done with this section," she called without looking down. "You're not Ava." The deep voice froze her in place. Something about it, the cadence, the slight lift at the end of the sentence, sent a shock through her body. Slowly, she turned on the ladder. A man stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the light from the hallway. He wore an expensive suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was shorter and styled differently, and a thin scar ran along his jawline that hadn't been there before. But those eyes, those ocean blue eyes, were the same ones she'd gazed into on their wedding day. The duster slipped from Bethany's hand, landing with a soft thud on the carpet below. "Nathan." The name escaped her lips in a whisper. The man tilted his head slightly, brow furrowing. "I'm sorry. You must be mistaking me for someone else." He stepped fully into the room, moving with the confidence of someone who owned not just this house, but the ground beneath it. "I'm Scott Anderson, and you are..." Bethany's fingers gripped the ladder rung so tightly her knuckles turned white, her mind raced. It couldn't be. Nathan was dead. They'd found pieces of his boat after the storm. She'd buried an empty coffin. Yet here he was, different, but unmistakably him. I'm Bethany, the new cleaner." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Well, Bethany, I apologize for startling you. I wasn't scheduled to return until tomorrow, but plans changed." His voice was more refined than Nathan's had been, his vocabulary more polished. But that small crease between his eyebrows when he was thinking, that was Nathan through and through. "Not a problem, sir. I'll finish up and get out of your way." "No rush." Nathan moved toward the desk, loosening his tie. "Actually, have we met before? You look familiar somehow?" Bethany's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "I don't think so, sir." He studied her for a moment longer, then shrugged. "Must be mistaken." She climbed down from the ladder on shaky legs, bending to retrieve the fallen duster. When she straightened, he was watching her with that same puzzled expression Nathan used to have when trying to solve a particularly challenging problem. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I'm fine," she lied, gathering her cleaning supplies. "Just need some air." She practically ran from the room, bumping into Ava in the hallway. "What's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." A ghost. Yes, that's exactly what she'd seen. "Mr. Anderson, he's back early," Bethany managed. "He is. Well, finish the west bathrooms and then you can go." Ava hurried off, leaving Bethany leaning against the wall, struggling to breathe. Somehow, she finished her assigned tasks, moving on autopilot. Her mind whirled with confusion, hope, fear. It couldn't be him, but it was. The way he held his shoulders, the slight tilt of his head when he spoke, the way his left eye crinkled slightly more than his right when his expression changed. The second she left the mansion, she pulled out her phone with trembling hands and searched "Scott Anderson businessman." Dozens of articles appeared, showing a successful CEO who had emerged in the business world approximately 7 years ago. Before that, nothing. There were photos of him at galas, cutting ribbons, shaking hands with politicians. In every image, those familiar eyes stared back at her. On the bus ride home, hunched over her phone, she devoured every article she could find. Scott Anderson had no history prior to 7 years ago. His official biography was vague, mentioning only that he was a distant cousin of the late Jason Anderson who stepped in to run the family business after Jason's death. There were no childhood photos, no college records, no family connections other than Lauren Anderson, Jason's widow. By the time Bethany reached her stop, one thing was clear. She needed to get back into that house. She needed to know if Scott Anderson was really her Nathan, and if he was, why he didn't remember her. Bethany checked her watch. The kids would be home from school soon. Chelsea would have questions about her red eyes and distracted manner. Smart girl, that one. Too smart sometimes. Tonight, after the children were asleep, she would dig out the old photo albums hidden in the back of her closet. She would compare every line, every feature, and tomorrow, she would call the agency and beg for a permanent position at the Anderson estate. If there was even the slightest chance that the man in that library was her husband, she would move heaven and earth to bring him home. The key turned in the lock with a soft click as Bethany slipped into her apartment. The familiar scent of the lemon cleaner she used at home mixed with the lingering aroma of that morning's oatmeal. Such a stark contrast to the Anderson mansion with its expensive perfumes and polished wood. "Mom, is that you?" Chelsea's voice called from the small kitchen. "Yeah, honey, I'm home." Bethany set down her bag, plastering on a smile before her oldest daughter could see her face. Chelsea appeared in the doorway, dark hair pulled into a messy bun, a textbook clutched to her chest. At 15, she already had the worried eyes of someone much older. "You're late. I was getting worried." "Sorry, new client, big house." Bethany moved to the kitchen, checking the pot of macaroni and cheese simmering on the stove. "Where are your brother and sister?" "Mark's helping Alexa with her exercises. The physical therapist gave her new ones today." Chelsea studied her mother's face. "You okay? You look weird." Bethany turned away, stirring the pot unnecessarily. "Just tired. How was school?" "I got an A on my biology test." Chelsea's voice brightened momentarily before returning to that too mature tone. "And Miss Ramirez thinks I should apply for that summer medical program at County Hospital." "That's wonderful." Bethany turned, genuinely smiling now. "We'll find a way to make it happen." Chelsea's eyes flickered with doubt, but she nodded. They both knew what went unsaid. Money was always the issue. Down the hall, Mark's gentle voice floated out from the bedroom, counting repetitions as he helped Alexa stretch her weakening muscles. Such a patient boy, just like his father, Nathan, Scott, whoever he was now. "I need to change," Bethany murmured, slipping past Chelsea toward her bedroom. Once alone, she closed the door and sank onto her bed, head in hands. She'd spent 8 years rebuilding a life from ashes, teaching her children to honor their father's memory while moving forward. Now everything was unraveling with a single encounter. From her closet's highest shelf, she pulled down a dusty box labeled winter clothes. Inside, beneath old sweaters, lay the albums and mementos she couldn't bear to display, but couldn't bring herself to discard. With trembling fingers, she lifted out their wedding photo. Nathan Miller grinned back at her, his arm around her waist, ocean blue eyes crinkled with joy. Younger, less polished than Scott Anderson, but unmistakably the same man. Across town, in the master suite of the Anderson estate, Scott loosened his tie and sank into a leather armchair. His head throbbed. These migraines were becoming more frequent. The medication Lauren insisted he take didn't seem to help anymore. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he saw the cleaner's face again, her wide, shocked eyes when she'd looked at him, like she'd seen a ghost. Why had she called him Nathan? His phone buzzed. Lauren. Scott, darling, how was the trip? Her voice carried that saccharine quality it always had. Sweet, but somehow leaving a bitter aftertaste. Productive. We closed the Singapore deal. Wonderful. I knew you would. She paused. How are you feeling? Any episodes? Episodes. That's what she called the strange flashes. The disorienting moments when he'd hear a song or smell something that triggered a cascade of emotions with no memories attached. I'm fine, Lauren. Taking your medication. Yes, he lied smoothly, glancing at the untouched pill bottle. The migraines were bad, but the fog that descended after taking those pills was worse. Good. I'll be down Thursday. The doctor wants to do your regular checkup. Scott pinched the bridge of his nose. Looking forward to it, he lied again. After hanging up, he moved to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. In the mirror, the thin scar along his jawline stood out against his skin. Lauren told him it was from the car accident that took his memories, the one that happened right after his cousin Jason's death. Convenient timing. That accident. There were days when the story felt rehearsed, a script everyone knew but him. He returned to the bedroom and opened his laptop, absently scrolling through emails while his mind drifted. The cleaner's face kept appearing in his thoughts. Bethany. Something about her tugged at him. Not just her beauty, though she was beautiful in an unassuming way. It was more like déjà vu, a recognition he couldn't place. Scott shook his head, trying to focus on work. This was ridiculous. She was just the cleaning lady. Back in her apartment, Bethany tucked Alexa into bed, smoothing the dark curls from her forehead. At 8, she was the spitting image of Nathan, right down to the dimple in her left cheek. Did you take your medicine, pumpkin? Alexa nodded, her eyes already heavy. Mom, will I ever get better? Bethany's heart clenched. The doctors are doing everything they can, and you're the strongest girl I know. Dad was strong too. Right, that's what you always say. The strongest, Bethany whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. Just like you. She left the door cracked open and found Mark at the kitchen table, hunched over homework. At 12, he already carried himself with the same quiet determination Nathan had. Hey buddy, need help? Mark shook his head. I got it, but I've been thinking about the recital next month. What about it? He fidgeted with his pencil. The music teacher says I should play Dad's song, the one he wrote for you. Bethany's breath caught. Nathan had composed a melody for their wedding. Taught himself piano just to play it for her. Mark had found the sheet music years ago, and taught himself to play it too. I think he'd love that, she managed later, alone in the living room. Bethany called the cleaning agency. Janet, it's Bethany. I need a favor, the Anderson job. I want it permanently. That's a 3-day-a-week position. What about your other clients? I'll make it work, please, Janet. Well, as luck would have it, Mrs. Anderson called today, said they were satisfied with your work and requested you specifically. Bethany nearly dropped the phone. Mrs. Anderson? Lauren Anderson. That's right. Looks like you made an impression. After hanging up, Bethany sat in stunned silence. Lauren Anderson had requested her. The same Lauren who, according to Bethany's research, had been controlling Scott's life since his appearance 7 years ago. Either this was incredible luck, or something wasn't right. 8 years earlier, Nathan Miller kissed his wife goodbye on a sunny morning. Their 3 young children still asleep upstairs. I'll be back tonight, he promised. It's just a test run of the navigation system. In a storm. Bethany frowned, straightening his collar. Can it wait? That's the point. Testing it in rough conditions. He grinned, that crooked smile that still made her heart flutter after years of marriage. Don't worry. I've got too much to come home to. She'd believed him. They all had. That afternoon, The Coast Guard called. Pieces of his boat had been found, scattered across miles of coastline. No body, just wreckage, and the cruel certainty of physics. No one could have survived that impact. Those waves, those rocks, within weeks. The insurance company denied their claim, citing operator negligence. Overnight, Bethany became a single mother with 3 children, no income, and a mountain of debt from Nathan's startup. She'd learned to clean houses, waiting tables at night while neighbors watched her children. She'd sold their house, moved to the apartment, counted pennies and sacrificed everything to keep her family afloat. And all that time, was he living in luxury as Scott Anderson? Was it possible that he'd abandoned them? Or was something more sinister at work? Bethany clutched the wedding photo to her chest, tears streaming down her face. No, the Nathan she knew would never leave them willingly. Something had happened to him. Someone had taken him, and she would move heaven and earth to get him back. On her first official day as the Anderson Estate's permanent cleaning staff, Bethany arrived early. The morning fog clung to the cliffside mansion, shrouding it in an ethereal glow that made it seem more like a mirage than a real home. 7 a.m. on the dot, Ava remarked, opening the service entrance. Punctual. I like that. Bethany nodded, clutching her bag of personal cleaning supplies, a habit from years of working in homes where the provided materials were subpar. Good morning. Mr. Anderson left for New York last night, Ava said, leading her through the kitchen where a young man in chef's whites was prepping breakfast. Mrs. Anderson arrives this afternoon. She'll be staying through the weekend. Bethany's heart skipped. Mrs. Anderson, Scott's wife. Ava's laugh was sharp and quick. Heavens no, his mother-in-law. Well, sort of. Lauren was married to Jason Anderson, Scott's cousin. After Jason died, she took Scott under her wing, quite the devoted mentor. That woman. Mother-in-law, not wife. The relief Bethany felt was immediate and shameful. I'll need the guest suite prepared, Ava continued. The blue room and her private bathroom require special attention. She's particular about water spots. Throughout the morning, Bethany worked methodically, using each task as an opportunity to learn the layout of the mansion and gather information. The chef, Miguel, was chatty, sharing gossip as she cleaned the breakfast nook. Mrs. Anderson's visits always throw the house into chaos, he confided, chopping vegetables. Mr. Scott is different when she's here. More. Controlled. How so? Miguel shrugged. She brings his doctor. They have meetings in the study afterward. Mr. Scott is quieter, less himself. Bethany paused in her polishing. His doctor, is he sick? An accident years ago before he came here? Miguel tapped his temple. Memory problems, Mrs. Anderson makes sure he gets his treatments. A chill ran through Bethany. Memory problems, treatments. The pieces were beginning to form a disturbing pattern. By midday, she'd worked her way to the east wing, where Scott's private quarters were located. The door to his bedroom was open. Ava, inside changing linens. Need help? Bethany offered. Ava looked up. Actually, yes. These king sheets are a nightmare alone. Together they made the bed, a massive four-poster that dominated the room, on the nightstand. Bethany noticed a prescription bottle. Casually, she moved closer, reading the label while fluffing a pillow. Lorazepam. He gets terrible migraines, Ava said, following her gaze. Among other things. Other things. Ava's lips tightened. Not my business to discuss Mr. Anderson's health, Bethany nodded, backing off, but her mind was racing. Why would Nathan, Scott, need anti-anxiety medication? And what were these treatments Lauren supervised? As she dusted the bookshelves, Bethany noticed photographs. Scott with politicians, at charity galas, cutting ribbons, but nothing personal. No family photos, no childhood pictures. It was as if Scott Anderson hadn't existed before 7 years ago. A throat cleared behind them. Bethany turned to find an elderly man in the doorway, weathered face lined with years in the sun. Elijah, Ava acknowledged. What is it? Gardening crew needs to know if Mrs. Anderson still wants those rose bushes moved. I'll check the instructions she sent. Ava turned to Bethany. This is Elijah Barrett, head groundskeeper, been with the Anderson family forever. 32 years, Elijah corrected, his eyes crinkling. Since before the young Mr. Anderson was even in the picture. Bethany extended her hand. Bethany Johnson. Elijah's handshake was firm. His eyes shrewd as they studied her face. New cleaning staff. Hope you last longer than the others. Others? Bethany asked. We've had trouble keeping staff, Ava said quickly. The commute is difficult for most. Elijah's smile didn't reach his eyes. Among other things, the tension between them was palpable. Bethany filed the information away. Another mystery in this house of shadows. By afternoon, the atmosphere in the mansion had shifted. Staff moved with heightened alertness, triple-checking details. At 3:30 p.m., the crunch of tires on gravel announced Lauren Anderson's arrival. Bethany was polishing silver in the dining room when the front door opened. From her position, she had a clear view of the foyer as a statuesque woman in her 60s swept in, followed by a man carrying medical bags. Lauren Anderson exuded power. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant bob, her posture military straight. Despite her age, her face was remarkably smooth, the best plastic surgery money could buy. She surveyed the foyer with the critical eye of a general inspecting troops. Ava, the house looks acceptable. Is everything prepared for Dr. Whitman? Yes, Mrs. Anderson. The study is ready. Lauren nodded crisply, then caught sight of Bethany through the doorway. Their eyes locked for a brief, electric moment before Bethany lowered her gaze, heart pounding. New staff? Lauren asked Ava, her voice carrying clearly. Yes, ma'am. Bethany Johnson. Started full-time this week. Lauren studied Bethany for another unsettling moment, then turned away dismissively. Ensure she understands our standards. As Lauren and the doctor disappeared down the hallway, Bethany exhaled shakily. There had been no recognition in Lauren's eyes. No indication she knew Bethany was Nathan's wife. Just the cold assessment of someone who viewed household staff as furniture. Best stay out of her way, Ava murmured, returning to the dining room. Mrs. Anderson doesn't like to be disturbed when she's here for Scott's treatments. What kind of doctor is he? Bethany asked, nodding toward where Dr. Whitman had followed Lauren. Neurologist, psychiatrist, something like that. Ava's voice lowered. They lock themselves in the study for hours when Scott comes out. She shook her head. What happens? Ava glanced around nervously. He's different, foggy. Sometimes he doesn't recognize the staff right away. Like his mind's been reset. It passes by morning. A chill ran through Bethany. Reset. What were they doing to him? At home that evening, Bethany's mind whirled with theories as she prepared dinner. The prescription bottle. The mysterious doctor. Lauren's controlling presence. Something was very wrong at the Anderson estate. Mom, you're burning the onions. Chelsea's voice cut through her thoughts. Sorry, honey. Bethany quickly removed the pan from the heat. Just distracted. Chelsea studied her mother's face. Is it the new job? You seem different since you started there. Bethany forced a smile. It's a big house, lots to learn. I could help sometimes if they need extra hands. I'm good at organizing. No, Bethany said too quickly. The last thing she wanted was Chelsea anywhere near Lauren Anderson. I mean, you need to focus on school. Chelsea's expression hardened slightly. Lately, she'd been giving Bethany that look more often. The look that said she knew she wasn't getting the whole truth. After dinner, while Mark helped Alexa with her homework, Chelsea cornered Bethany in the kitchen. What aren't you telling me? She demanded in a low voice. You've been acting weird for days, checking your phone constantly, staying up late researching stuff online. It's nothing, sweetheart. Don't treat me like a kid, Mom. I'm 15 if something's wrong. I deserve to know. Bethany sighed, conflicted. Chelsea was right. She was mature beyond her years, shouldering responsibilities no teenager should have to bear. But how could Bethany explain what she herself didn't fully understand? It's complicated, she said finally. Work stuff, adult stuff. Chelsea's eyes narrowed. Fine, don't tell me. She turned away, but not before Bethany caught the hurt in her expression. Chelsea, forget it. I have homework. After the children were asleep, Bethany sat at their small kitchen table with her laptop, researching memory disorders and treatments. The more she read, the more convinced she became that whatever was happening to Scott Anderson was not standard medical practice. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Be careful what you ask around the house. Walls have ears. Meet me at the gardener's shed tomorrow, 3 p.m. Elijah, the groundskeeper. What did he know? Bethany stared at the message, hope and fear battling within her. Someone else had noticed something wasn't right. She wasn't crazy, but if Lauren Anderson discovered she was asking questions, outside her apartment window, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there before. Coincidence? Or was someone watching her? The shadows were deepening, and Bethany was beginning to realize just how dangerous this game might be. The black sedan was gone by morning, but the unease lingered. Bethany dropped the kids at school and arrived at the Anderson estate with her mind racing. Lauren's presence had transformed the mansion overnight. Fresh flowers in every room, staff moving with heightened efficiency, and a tangible tension in the air. "Library needs attention," Ava instructed, handing Bethany a list. "Mr. Anderson spent the morning there before his treatment." Bethany's heart leapt. "He's back from New York. Returned at dawn." Ava lowered her voice. Mrs. Anderson wasn't pleased. The doctor had to reschedule his entire day in the library. Bethany found evidence of Scott's presence. An abandoned coffee cup, financial reports spread across the desk, a jacket draped over a chair. She touched the leather jacket lightly, remembering how Nathan had saved for months to buy one just like it before they were married, as she dusted bookshelves. Bethany's eyes fell on a collection of classical music records. Nathan had loved Chopin. It had been the soundtrack to their first date. With a furtive glance at the door, she selected a Chopin nocturne and placed it on the antique record player in the corner. Soft, haunting piano notes filled the room. Bethany closed her eyes for a moment, transported back to their tiny first apartment, dancing in socked feet while their newborn Chelsea slept nearby. Next, she retrieved a small bottle from her pocket, Nathan's favorite cologne. She'd kept it all these years, unopened. Carefully, she spritzed a small amount on the curtains near his desk, just enough to subtly permeate the air without being obvious. The final touch was the most daring. From her cleaning caddy, Bethany removed a book she'd brought from home, a first edition Hemingway that Nathan had treasured. Inside the front cover, his name was inscribed in his distinctive handwriting. She slipped it onto a shelf at eye level, between similar-looking volumes where it wouldn't stand out but might catch Scott's attention. Seeds planted. She continued her cleaning, heart pounding with the risk she was taking. Scott Anderson pressed his palms against his temples, willing the fog to lift. Lauren's treatments always left him feeling hollowed out, like someone had scooped away parts of himself he couldn't identify. Dr. Whitman assured him it was a necessary part of managing his condition. The memory loss, the migraines, the episodes of disorientation that had plagued him since the accident. An accident he couldn't remember. "The medication will help with the headache," Lauren said, her voice coming from what seemed like very far away. She pressed 2 pills into his palm. "Take these now." Scott obediently swallowed the medication. Lauren had been his rock since he'd awakened in that hospital room 7 years ago, with no memories of his life before. She'd guided him through rehabilitation, taught him about the Anderson business empire that was supposedly his birthright, created a new life for him from scratch. So why did he increasingly feel like a puppet on strings? "I need to lie down," he murmured, rising unsteadily. Lauren frowned. "Doctor, Whitman wants to run another session this evening." "No." The firmness in his voice surprised them both. "Not today, Lauren. I'm done for today." Her eyes narrowed. "Scott, be reasonable. Your condition." "My condition hasn't improved in 7 years under Whitman's care," he snapped. "Maybe it's time to try something different." Lauren's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. Then her mask was back in place. "We'll discuss this later. Rest now." Alone in his suite, Scott collapsed onto his bed, the ceiling spinning above him. These episodes were becoming more frequent, the disorientation lasting longer, but beneath the confusion, something else was stirring. Doubt, fragments of dreams that didn't align with the life Lauren had constructed for him, instinctive knowledge of things Scott Anderson shouldn't know. Last week, he'd found himself humming a melody he'd never heard. At least, not in this life. Yesterday, he'd automatically reached for the light switch in his New York apartment with his left hand, though it had always been on the right. Small discrepancies, tiny fractures in the narrative. When the worst of the dizziness passed, Scott made his way to the library, his one sanctuary in this mausoleum of a house. The moment he opened the door, something felt different. The air held a scent that tugged at his subconscious. Clean, citrusy, with undertones of cedar, familiar in a way that made his heart race. As he moved toward his desk, music reached his ears. A Chopin nocturne he didn't remember putting on. The melody wrapped around him like an embrace, bringing with it a cascade of sensations: soft laughter, warm hands, the taste of cheap wine, a sense of home that had nothing to do with this mansion. Scott sank into his chair, overwhelming emotion tightening his throat. What was happening to him? His gaze fell on a book that seemed slightly out of place on the shelf. Something compelled him to rise and pull it from its spot. A Hemingway first edition. He hadn't realized he owned this. Opening the cover, he found an inscription: "Property of Nathan Miller." The name sent a jolt through him. Nathan. The cleaner had called him Nathan that first day. Scott ran his fingers over the handwriting. Something about the loops of the letters, the pressure of the pen. It felt like watching his own handwrite. A wave of dizziness hit him, and for a moment, the room seemed to shift, overlaying with a different space. Smaller, warmer, walls painted a soft yellow instead of mahogany paneling. "Mr. Anderson," Scott startled, nearly dropping the book. Ava stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Are you all right?" "Sir, you look unwell." "I'm fine." He slipped the book into his desk drawer. "Just tired from the flight." After Ava left, Scott leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. The cologne scent, the music, the book. Someone had deliberately placed these things here. Someone was trying to trigger... what? Memories? A reaction? The cleaner. It had to be her. The way she'd looked at him that first day. The shock and recognition in her eyes. Scott pulled out his phone, dialing the head of security. "Jim, I need everything you have on Bethany Johnson, the new cleaning staff." "Yes, everything." From the doorway of the mansion's east wing, Chelsea watched her mother slip something onto a bookshelf, then spray something on the curtains. For 3 days, she'd been following Bethany after school, ducking out of her last period class and taking the bus to the Anderson estate. Something was going on with her mom, and if Bethany wouldn't tell her what, she'd find out for herself. Chelsea knew her mother's schedule by heart. Which house on which day, when Chelsea confirmed Bethany was working at the mansion, she had simply walked up to the service entrance, claimed her mother had forgotten her lunch, and asked where to find her. The young kitchen staff had directed her through the maze of hallways without question. Now, hidden in an alcove, she watched her mother's strange behavior with growing confusion. Bethany looked different here. Tense, hyper-vigilant, constantly watching doorways as if expecting someone. This wasn't about work stuff or adult stuff. Something serious was happening. As her mother moved to another part of the library, Chelsea noticed a framed photograph on the wall, a group picture of men in business suits at some kind of corporate event. She crept closer for a better look. Her breath caught. There, in the center of the photo, was a face she knew from the pictures her mother kept hidden in their apartment, her father. But the photo was recent, dated just last year according to the small plaque beneath it, and he was labeled as Scott Anderson, CEO. Chelsea pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Her father was alive, living as someone else. Had her mother known all along? The sound of approaching footsteps sent her ducking behind a curtain. Through a small gap, she watched as an elegant older woman entered the library, surveying the room with narrowed eyes. The woman paused, sniffing the air suspiciously, then moved to the record player and lifted the needle with a sharp gesture. "What is this doing on?" she demanded as Bethany re-entered from the adjoining room. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Chelsea heard her mother say in a deferential tone she'd never used at home. "I thought some music would be nice while I worked. I didn't realize." "Don't touch anything that isn't part of your cleaning duties," the woman snapped. "And finish up quickly. This wing is off limits after 4 today." When the woman left, Bethany's shoulders sagged. She looked directly at the curtain where Chelsea was hiding and whispered, "You can come out now. She's gone." Chelsea stepped out, caught. "Mom, what's going on? That picture. Is that Dad? Is he alive?" Bethany's face drained of color. "What are you doing here? You should be in school. Answer me. Is that Dad in that picture? Is he Scott Anderson?" Bethany grabbed Chelsea's arm, pulling her toward the service stairs. "Not here. Not now." We need to get you out of the house before anyone sees you. You've been lying to us all this time, Chelsea hissed, tears welling. All those years we struggled. And Dad's been living like a king in this mansion. It's not what you think, Bethany whispered urgently. I just found out myself. He doesn't remember us, Chelsea. Something happened to him. And these people, they've done something to his mind. The magnitude of what her mother was saying hit Chelsea like a physical blow. Her father was alive but didn't know who he was, and her mother was... What? Trying to make him remember, as they reached the service entrance, Chelsea turned to her mother. I want to help. Whatever you're doing, I want to be part of it. Bethany closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. Tonight. We'll talk tonight. But you have to promise me. No more sneaking around here, it's not safe. Behind them, the sound of a door opening sent them both hurrying outside into the garden, unaware of the security camera that had captured their hasty exit. A light rain fell as Bethany hurried toward the gardener's shed at precisely 3 p.m. The following day, after getting Chelsea safely away from the mansion and extracting a reluctant promise that she wouldn't return without permission, Bethany had spent a sleepless night planning her next move. The wooden shed stood nestled among towering cypress trees at the far edge of the property, hidden from the main house by a hedge of rhododendrons. As Bethany approached, the door creaked open. You're punctual, Elijah said, ushering her inside. Good trade in this business. Cleaning houses. Investigating the Andersons. He gestured to a worn chair. Sit. The shed's interior was unexpectedly comfortable. A small heater hummed in the corner. Bookshelves lined one wall, and gardening tools hung in meticulous order from pegs. Elijah took a seat across from her, weathered hands clasped on his knees. You recognized him the moment you saw him, didn't you? Elijah asked without preamble. Bethany tensed. Who? Your husband, Nathan Miller. Her heart stopped, then raced. How did you... I was here the night they brought him in. Elijah's eyes darkened with the memory. 8 years ago, storming something fierce. A car pulled up around 3 a.m. 2 men carrying an unconscious man between them. Lauren directing everything like a military operation. You saw Nathan? Elijah nodded. Didn't know who he was then, of course. Just that something wasn't right. The man was injured. Head wound soaking wet. They took him to the East Wing, locked it down, doctors coming and going for weeks. And you never reported this? To who? The Andersons own half the police department. Elijah sighed. Besides, Lauren had a story ready. Distant cousin, terrible accident, private medical care. Nothing illegal about that on the surface. Bethany leaned forward. But you knew something was wrong. The timing was suspicious. Jason Anderson had died just days before. Heart attack, supposedly. Then suddenly this mysterious cousin appears to take over the business. Elijah shook his head. I kept my head down, watched, listened. Been waiting years for someone else to notice. Why help me? Why now? Because he's getting worse. Elijah's voice dropped. The treatments are happening more often. Whatever they're doing to keep him controlled isn't working like it used to. The doctor, Whitman. What exactly does he do? Some kind of drug therapy. I've overheard things. They use medications to suppress specific memories while maintaining his intelligence and business skills. Elijah reached behind him and pulled out a small notebook. I've been documenting everything. Dates, times, who comes and goes. But I'm just the gardener. You're inside the house. Bethany took the notebook with shaking hands. I need proof that he's Nathan. Something concrete. There might be medical records in Lauren's private safe. She keeps it behind the painting in her bedroom. But getting access... He shook his head. I'll find a way. Bethany tucked the notebook into her pocket. Is there anyone else we can trust in the house? Ava. She doesn't know everything, but she suspects. Been with the family 30 years. Loyal to the Andersons, but has her own code of ethics. Lauren's pushed her too far lately. Elijah paused. And there's someone else who might help. Not in the house, but nearby. Who? Pastor Noah at St. Michael's. Lauren confides in him. Catholic guilt, I suppose. He can't break confidentiality directly, but Bethany's brow furrowed. St. Michael's. That's our church. I've spoken with Pastor Noah many times, but he's never mentioned. He wouldn't, but he watches, listens. Elijah stood as the sound of approaching footsteps reached them. Saturday mornings, Lauren's at the country club. Ava does inventory in the wine cellar. The east wing is less guarded then. Bethany nodded, understanding the implied opportunity. As she slipped out of the shed, Elijah called softly after her. "Mrs. Miller, be careful. Lauren Anderson isn't just wealthy. She's dangerous, and she's watching you closer than you think." St. Michael's stood on a bluff overlooking the ocean, its stone walls weathered by decades of salt air. Bethany knelt in a pew, waiting until the elderly woman finished her confession before approaching the confessional herself. Inside the dim booth, she crossed herself automatically, the habits of a lifetime taking over despite her racing mind. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's been 2 weeks since my last confession. What troubles you, my child?" Pastor Noah's gentle voice came through the screen. Bethany hesitated. "Father, I've been having thoughts of revenge against someone who has hurt my family deeply. Revenge is a poison we drink ourselves, hoping others will die from it." His tone shifted subtly. "Is this about your new employment, Bethany?" Her breath caught. I know you've taken a position at the Anderson estate." "Yes." A pause. "And I know that Lauren Anderson comes to confession regularly, though what she confesses remains between her and God. Father, I believe she's holding my husband against his will. Nathan didn't die in that accident 8 years ago somehow. He became Scott Anderson." The silence from the other side of the screen stretched long enough that Bethany feared she'd made a terrible mistake. Then Noah spoke, his voice careful and measured. "Hypothetically speaking, if someone were being medically manipulated to forget their true identity, exposure to significant emotional triggers might help recover those memories. Family photographs, meaningful music, the scent of a familiar perfume or cologne." Bethany's pulse quickened. "I've tried those things. There was some reaction, but hypothetically," Noah continued as if she hadn't spoken, "such a person might also respond to the presence of a loved one with a shared medical condition. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Alexa, her heart condition, the same rare arrhythmia Nathan had managed his entire life. And if such a person had been receiving medications to suppress memory, those medications might be failing over time. The mind fights to recover what was lost." Noah's voice lowered further. "Lauren has been increasingly concerned about Scott's episodes of recognition. She believes they're becoming unmanageable." A chill ran through Bethany. "What is she planning?" "I cannot say more, but whatever you do, Bethany, it must be done quickly, for everyone's sake." The sound of shifting fabric came through the screen. "3 Hail Marys for your penance. Go in peace." Chelsea was waiting when Bethany arrived home, arms crossed defensively. "You promised we'd talk." Bethany set down her purse, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "Let me check on Alexa and Mark first." "They're fine, Mrs. Diaz is helping them with dinner." Chelsea's chin lifted. "I want to know everything, Mom. No more secrets." In the living room, Bethany sank onto the couch, beckoning her daughter to join her. For a moment, she simply studied Chelsea's face, so much like Nathan's, with those same determined eyes that missed nothing. "Your father is alive," she confirmed quietly, "but he doesn't know who he is. He believes he's Scott Anderson." Chelsea nodded, unsurprised after what she'd seen. "How?" "I'm still figuring that out. Something happened the night of the storm. Instead of drowning, your father was taken. His head injury caused amnesia, and Lauren Anderson has been keeping him that way using drugs and some kind of therapy. Why? Money, power. The Andersons needed someone brilliant to run their company after Jason died." Bethany hesitated. "There's more to it, but I don't have all the pieces yet." Chelsea processed this. Her analytical mind, another trait from her father, clearly working through implications. "So what's the plan? How do we get him back?" "I'm working on it. I have help. The gardener, Elijah, and possibly others." "I can help too," Chelsea insisted. "He's my dad." Bethany studied her daughter, recognizing the determination in her expression. "It could be dangerous. More dangerous than leaving him with people who are basically brainwashing him," Chelsea countered. "Besides, 2 pairs of eyes are better than 1, and I can research things online that you might not have time for." Reluctantly, Bethany nodded. "Limited involvement, research only, and you tell me everything you find." "Deal." Chelsea hesitated. Should we tell Mark and Alexa? Not yet. Mark's too young to keep a secret this big, and Alexa... Bethany's voice caught. Her heart couldn't take the stress, as if summoned by her name. Alexa appeared in the doorway, her small face pale. Mom, my chest feels funny again. Bethany was on her feet instantly, guiding her youngest to the couch. Deep breaths, sweetheart. In through your nose, out through your mouth. As she helped Alexa through the breathing exercises the cardiologist had taught them, Bethany's mind raced with what Pastor Noah had said. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Perhaps Alexa's condition was the key to unlocking Nathan's memories. But bringing her daughter into this dangerous game, the thought made Bethany's own heart clench with fear. Behind them, unnoticed, Chelsea slipped away to her room, opening her laptop to begin her own investigation into the Anderson family and the mysterious accident that had supposedly claimed her father's life 8 years ago. 2 weeks passed with Lauren Anderson maintaining an almost constant presence at the mansion. Bethany's subtle attempts to reach Scott were thwarted at every turn. Lauren rearranged staff schedules, keeping Bethany away from the areas Scott frequented, and increased security throughout the estate. Even Elijah reported difficulty accessing his usual spots for surveillance. It's like she knows, Bethany whispered to Ava as they folded linens in the laundry room. Like she can sense we're trying to reach him. Ava glanced nervously at the door before responding. She had cameras installed in the library, found the book you planted, the Hemingway. Bethany's blood ran cold. How do you know? Overheard her on the phone with Whitman. She was furious. Ava's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the sheet. She's increased his medication, doubled the dose. Outside the window, a black car pulled into the driveway. The same model Bethany had spotted near her apartment. Her suspicions confirmed, she asked, "Has she mentioned me specifically?" "Not directly, but she's having background checks run on all staff." Ava hesitated. "Bethany, if she finds out who you really are..." The unfinished thought hung in the air between them. That evening, as Bethany prepared dinner, Chelsea burst into the apartment, eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, Mark got selected to perform at the Anderson Foundation charity event." Bethany nearly dropped the pot she was holding. "What?" Mark trailed behind his sister, clutching a formal invitation. "Ms. Peterson nominated me. Said I'm the best pianist she's taught in 20 years. His face shone with pride. "It's at Mr. Anderson's house this Saturday. The invitation says I can bring family members." Bethany took the heavy cream-colored card with trembling hands. The Anderson Foundation annual charity gala, cocktails, dinner, and entertainment featuring promising young local talents, hosted by Scott Anderson at his Ocean View estate. "Can we go, Mom? Please," Mark's eyes pleaded. "It's my chance to play for real important people." Bethany's mind raced. This could be the opportunity they'd been waiting for, a legitimate reason to be in the mansion with Nathan. But it also meant exposing her children to Lauren's scrutiny. "What will you play?" she asked. Mark's answer made her heart stop. "Dad's song, the one he wrote for you." Saturday evening arrived crisp and clear, stars emerging above the Pacific as Bethany parked their old sedan among the luxury vehicles crowding the Anderson estate driveway. Chelsea had helped style her hair in an elegant updo, and Mrs. Diaz from next door had loaned Bethany a simple black dress that actually fit. Mark looked handsome in his only suit, bought secondhand for a school concert last year, while Chelsea wore a borrowed blue dress that brought out her eyes. Alexa had stayed home with Mrs. Diaz. Much to her disappointment, her condition had worsened slightly in recent days, requiring additional medication that made her drowsy. Bethany had used this as the excuse to leave her behind, though the real reason was fear of Lauren Anderson's reaction to the child's presence. "Remember?" Bethany murmured as they approached the mansion's front entrance. So different from the service door she usually used. "We're just here to support Mark, nothing else." Chelsea squeezed her hand in silent understanding. The foyer had been transformed for the event. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above elegantly dressed guests sipping champagne. A string quartet played softly in one corner. Bethany felt distinctly out of place among the designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Mark Miller, a young woman with a clipboard, approached them. "The performers are gathering in the music room if you'll follow me." As Mark was led away, Bethany and Chelsea drifted toward the edges of the room, trying to blend in. From her vantage point, Bethany scanned for Scott, finally spotting him across the crowded space, deep in conversation with an elderly gentleman. Even from a distance, She could see the changes in him. His face was thinner, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting sleep deprivation. He moved with a slight hesitation, as if constantly recalibrating his surroundings. "That's him," Chelsea whispered, following her mother's gaze. "He looks exactly like the photos, just older." "That's your father," Bethany confirmed softly. Before Chelsea could respond, a cultured voice cut through their moment. "I don't believe we've met." Bethany turned to find Lauren Anderson standing behind them, champagne flute in hand, smile not reaching her cold eyes. Up close, Lauren was even more intimidating, impeccably dressed in a silver gown that probably cost more than Bethany earned in a year. "Mrs. Anderson," Bethany managed, her mouth suddenly dry. "I'm Bethany Johnson. My son Mark is performing tonight." Lauren's gaze flicked to Chelsea, then back to Bethany. Something calculating passed behind her eyes. "Ah, yes, the pianist. His teacher speaks highly of him." She tilted her head slightly. "You look familiar, Ms. Johnson. Have we met before?" "I clean your house 3 days a week," Bethany said, keeping her voice neutral despite her pounding heart. "Of course." Lauren's smile remained fixed. "And this is my daughter, Chelsea." Lauren studied Chelsea with uncomfortable intensity. "You have remarkable eyes. Young lady, so distinctive. They remind me of someone." Chelsea stiffened beside Bethany. "My father," she said boldly. "Everyone says I have his eyes. How fascinating." Lauren sipped her champagne. "And what does your father do, Chelsea?" "He died," Chelsea replied, holding Lauren's gaze. 8 years ago. "In a boating accident." Something flickered across Lauren's face. Recognition, followed by a flash of alarm, quickly masked. "How tragic. You have my condolences." Before the excruciating conversation could continue, a microphone squealed, drawing everyone's attention to the makeshift stage set up in the great room. The estate's event coordinator announced the beginning of the entertainment portion, and guests began drifting toward the rows of chairs. "Do enjoy the performances," Lauren said, her voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "We'll speak again later, I'm sure." As Lauren moved away, Bethany released a shaky breath. "She knows," she whispered. "She recognized you." "Good," Chelsea replied, a steely determination in her voice that reminded Bethany painfully of Nathan. "Let her know we're on to her." They found seats near the back of the room as the first young performer, a violinist, took the stage. Bethany's attention, however, remained fixed on Scott, who sat in the front row beside an empty chair, presumably reserved for Lauren. 4 performers later, the coordinator announced, "And now Mark Miller, performing an original composition." Mark walked to the grand piano, his small frame straight with nervous determination. As he settled on the bench, he glanced back at Bethany, who gave him an encouraging nod. The opening notes filled the room. Soft, hesitant at first, then building with a quiet confidence. The melody Nathan had composed for their wedding day, the song he'd played for Bethany on their 5th anniversary. Just months before his disappearance, Bethany's eyes fixed on Scott's back, watching for any reaction. At first there was nothing, just the slight sway that most people exhibit when listening to music. Then, as the melody reached its poignant middle section, she saw his shoulders tense, his head tilted slightly, as if trying to capture the notes more clearly. By the time Mark reached the crescendo, the part Nathan had always said represented the moment he knew he would love Bethany forever. Scott's hand had risen to his temple. Even from behind, Bethany could see the tension in his posture. Lauren noticed too. She appeared at Scott's side, leaning down to whisper something in his ear. He shook his head slightly, waving her off. His attention remained fixed on Mark, on the haunting melody that seemed to be reaching past the fog in his mind. As the final notes faded, the audience burst into applause. Mark stood and bowed, his face flushed with pride. When he looked up, his eyes met Scott's. The man he didn't know was his father, who was now standing, applauding with particular enthusiasm. Scott began moving toward the stage, but before he could reach Mark, he staggered suddenly, hand flying to his head. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as he collapsed to his knees. "Scott!" Lauren was at his side instantly, signaling to security. "Get Dr. Whitman now." Bethany was on her feet, every instinct screaming to go to him, but Chelsea held her back. "Not yet," she whispered urgently. "They'll throw us out, wait." Helpless, Bethany watched as Scott was helped from the room, Lauren directing everything with military precision. The coordinator quickly announced a short intermission, and concerned murmurs filled the space. Mark made his way back to them, confusion and concern on his face. "Did I do something wrong? Is Mr. Anderson okay?" "You were perfect, sweetheart," Bethany assured him, pulling him close. "Mr. Anderson just hasn't been feeling well." Over Mark's head, her eyes met Chelsea's. They both understood what had happened. The music, Nathan's music, had triggered something powerful enough to break through the medication, the conditioning, the carefully constructed identity of Scott Anderson. It was working. Nathan was still in there, fighting to remember, but Lauren Anderson was fighting just as hard to keep him locked away. The charity gala continued with forced cheer, but Scott Anderson's collapse cast a shadow over the evening. Guests whispered behind champagne flutes, speculation running rampant. Heart attack, stroke, nervous breakdown. "We should go," Bethany murmured to her children as the final performer finished, "before Lauren comes looking for us." As they slipped toward the exit, Ava intercepted them, pressing a folded napkin into Bethany's hand. "Kitchen entrance tomorrow, 6 a.m., on the drive home." Mark dozed in the back seat while Chelsea leaned forward, voice low. "What happened to him? Was it the music?" "Your father wrote that song for our wedding. It was special to us." Bethany gripped the steering wheel tighter. Pastor Noah said emotional triggers might help break through the memory blocks. "Well, it worked. Did you see his face?" Chelsea's excitement dimmed. "But now they know. Lauren knows. Which means we're running out of time." Bethany glanced at her sleeping son in the rearview mirror. "Mark can never know how much his performance affected Scott. Not until this is over. It would be too much pressure." Chelsea nodded. Then asked the question that had been haunting them both. What if Dad never fully remembers us? What if they've damaged his brain permanently? Then we document everything and take it to the authorities. Bethany's voice hardened. "One way or another, we're getting him back." At precisely 6 a.m., Bethany slipped through the kitchen entrance of the Anderson estate. The house was eerily quiet. Staff not yet arrived for the day. Ava waited by the industrial coffee machine, tension evident in her rigid posture. "We don't have much time. Security does rounds every 20 minutes. How is he?" "Sedated." Ava's lips thinned. "Heavily, after you left, he had what Dr. Whitman called a severe dissociative episode. He kept asking about the boy who played the piano." Hope flickered in Bethany's chest. "And Lauren told him the boy was just a local student, but Scott insisted he knew the melody." Ava glanced nervously at the door. "He said it was the song in his dreams." "What else?" "They locked themselves in the study. Lauren, Whitman, and that other doctor, the one who never gives his name. When they finally brought Scott out," Ava shuddered. "He was like a zombie, barely aware." Bethany's hands clenched into fists. "They're increasing the drugs again. Worse." Ava lowered her voice further. "I overheard them discussing a more permanent solution. Lauren said the episodes are happening too frequently, that the maintenance approach is failing." Cold dread settled in Bethany's stomach. What kind of permanent solution? Some procedure? Whitman argued against it, said it was too experimental, too risky. But Lauren insisted they had no choice. Ava pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "They don't know I took this. It was on Whitman's clipboard." Bethany unfolded the page. Medical jargon filled the top portion, but one phrase stood out in bold. "Targeted memory elimination procedure." Below was a consent form with Scott's signature and a date. 3 days from now. "They're going to erase his memories permanently," Bethany whispered, horror washing over her. "Not just suppress them, destroy them." "There's more." Ava hesitated. "Financial papers were delivered yesterday. Lauren's been moving massive amounts of money offshore, and I found this in the shredder." She handed Bethany another document, carefully pieced back together. Bethany scanned it quickly. A draft letter, written on Scott's letterhead, confessing to embezzlement from Anderson corporate accounts. The letter wasn't signed, but the implication was clear. She's setting him up, Bethany realized, the pieces clicking into place. The procedure is a failsafe. If he starts to remember, she'll have him declared mentally incompetent. If that doesn't work, she'll frame him for financial crimes. Why now, after all these years? Because he's fighting back. The real Nathan is starting to break through. Bethany carefully folded the papers. We need to get him out before the procedure. Ava's face paled. You can't just take him. Lauren has security everywhere. Then we need leverage. Bethany's mind raced. Proof of what she's done. Something that would make her back off. The sound of a door opening somewhere in the house made them both freeze. You need to go, Ava whispered urgently. Back entrance through the pantry. Bethany squeezed Ava's hand. Thank you for everything. As she hurried home through the early morning fog, Bethany's mind whirled with possibilities. None of them good. She needed help. Professional help. But who could stand against Lauren Anderson's money and influence? Chelsea looked up from her laptop as Bethany burst into the apartment. Mom, I found something. Bethany dropped her purse, rushing to her daughter's side. What is it? I've been digging into the Anderson family history. Chelsea turned the screen, showing a news article from 9 years ago. Look at this. Jason Anderson's company was failing before Dad's accident. They were on the verge of bankruptcy. And then suddenly they had revolutionary new navigation technology. Bethany murmured, the picture becoming clearer. Exactly. The same technology Dad was working on before he disappeared. Chelsea pulled up another window. And look at this. The patents were filed under Scott Anderson's name 7 years ago. But the preliminary research is almost identical to what Dad published in engineering journals. Bethany's breath caught. They stole his work. They stole him to steal his work. It gets worse. Chelsea clicked through to a database of old newspapers. I found this obituary from 30 years ago. Eleanor Miller, age 25. Nathan's mother. What about her? She had a twin sister who was given up for adoption at birth. The family tried to find her later but couldn't. Chelsea looked up at her mother, eyes wide. What if Lauren Anderson is that sister? What if this is all some twisted revenge against the family she thinks abandoned her? Bethany sank into a chair, the implications staggering. That would explain why she targeted Nathan specifically, but how would she even know who he was? I don't know yet, but there's one more thing. Chelsea hesitated. I found Dad's old email accounts and managed to guess the password. There was a message sent the day before his accident, from Jason Anderson, asking to meet privately about the navigation system. The final piece clicked into place. Nathan went to that meeting, discovered something he shouldn't have, and Jason's death right afterward wasn't a heart attack. Chelsea finished. Mom, these people are killers, before Bethany could respond. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Cautiously, she answered, Mrs. Miller. A man's voice, unfamiliar. This is Jim Barrett, Anderson Estate Security. Don't hang up. Bethany froze. How did you get this number? That doesn't matter. What matters is we have very little time. His voice was urgent but controlled. I'm Elijah's son. I've been watching out for my father, and now I need to warn you. About what? Lauren knows who you are. She's known since the gala. She has people watching your apartment right now. Bethany moved to the window, carefully peering through the blinds. A black sedan was parked across the street. What does she want? To scare you off, at minimum. The situation at the house has escalated, Scott. Nathan had another episode last night. He asked for you by name. Her heart leapt. He remembered me. Not exactly. He kept saying, Bethany has the answers, over and over. Lauren sedated him, but she's furious. The procedure has been moved up. It's happening tomorrow. Tomorrow! Panic rose in Bethany's throat. That's too soon. We're not ready. You don't have a choice. Either you make a move now, or Nathan Miller disappears forever. Jim's voice lowered. There's a security shift change at 11 p.m. The East Wing service entrance will be unmonitored for approximately 7 minutes. I'll make sure the cameras malfunction. Why are you helping us? A pause. My father believes in justice, so do I. With that, he hung up. Bethany turned to Chelsea, who had heard enough to understand the situation. We're going in tonight, Bethany said. Decision made. Call Mrs. Diaz. Ask if Mark and Alexa can sleep over. I'm coming with you, Chelsea stated, her tone brooking no argument. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. You need backup, and if Dad's having trouble remembering, seeing both of us might help. Chelsea crossed her arms. Besides, I can download everything from his computer while you get him out, evidence. Bethany studied her daughter. So young, yet so determined. So like Nathan. This isn't a game, Chelsea. These people have already proven they're willing to do anything to protect their secrets, which is exactly why you can't go alone. Chelsea held her mother's gaze. We're stronger together. Isn't that what you and Dad always taught us? After a long moment, Bethany nodded reluctantly. We go in. We get your father. We get out. No heroics. No detours. As they began planning their infiltration, neither noticed the small figure listening from the hallway. Alexa, wide-eyed, clutching her chest as she absorbed the shocking truth about her father. Darkness enveloped the Anderson estate as Bethany and Chelsea crouched behind the gardener's shed. Dressed in black, waiting for the digital watch to hit 11,000 p.m., the main house loomed against the night sky, most windows dark, except for a single light in the east wing. Scott's quarters. Remember the plan? Bethany whispered, checking the small backpack containing clothes for Nathan, his old wallet with family photos, and printouts of Chelsea's research. 7 minutes to get to his room, if he's too sedated to move. We abort. Chelsea nodded, clutching a USB drive she'd prepared to download files from Scott's computer. What if Lauren's with him? She won't be. Elijah confirmed she's at the clinic with Whitman. Preparing for tomorrow. Bethany checked her watch again. Almost time. At 10:59, the security light above the East Wing service entrance flickered and went dark. Jim Barrett had kept his word. They moved swiftly across the grounds, keeping to the shadows, and reached the door just as Bethany's watch showed $11,000 exactly. The code Elijah had provided worked. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a dimly lit service corridor. Bethany led the way, having memorized the layout during her cleaning shifts. 3 rights, a left, then up the back stairs to the private suites. Scott's bedroom door was unlocked, another of Jim's promised assists. Bethany pushed it open slowly, heart pounding so loudly she feared it would wake him. The large room was bathed in the soft glow of a bedside lamp. Scott lay on the bed, still fully dressed in slacks and a shirt, though his feet were bare. His breathing was deep and regular, but his brow was furrowed even in sleep, as if troubled by dreams. Dad, Chelsea whispered, stopping in the doorway, the reality of seeing her father after 8 years momentarily overwhelming her. Bethany approached the bed cautiously. Nathan, she called softly, then louder. Nathan. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. She touched his shoulder gently, then with more pressure. Nathan, wake up, we need to go. Slowly, his eyes opened, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as they fixed on her face. For a heart-stopping moment, there was no recognition, just confusion. Then something shifted in his expression. The cleaner, he murmured, voice thick with whatever drugs they'd given him. Bethany. Yes, it's me. She helped him sit up. We don't have much time. We need to get you out of here. He rubbed his face, struggling against the medication's effects. Out. Why? What's happening? They're going to perform a procedure tomorrow. To permanently erase your memories? His eyes widened, a flash of fear breaking through the drug-induced fog. My memories? The song? The boy who played the song. That was our son, Mark, Bethany said, gesturing to Chelsea. And this is our daughter, Chelsea. Scott's gaze shifted to the teenage girl standing nervously at the foot of the bed. He studied her face with intensity, something struggling to connect in his mind. Chelsea, he repeated slowly, as if testing the name on his tongue. Chelsea stepped forward. Dad, it's me. You used to call me Starfish, because I always slept with my arms and legs spread out. A tremor passed through Scott's body. He pressed his palms to his temples, eyes squeezing shut. I can't remember. It's okay, Bethany soothed, though her voice betrayed her urgency. We need to go now. We can explain everything once you're safe. He looked up, confusion giving way to a more focused panic. Safe from what? From who? From Lauren Anderson, Chelsea said bluntly. She's been drugging you, keeping you from remembering who you really are. You're not Scott Anderson. You're Nathan Miller, our father. Before Scott could respond, the sound of a door closing somewhere in the house jolted them all to attention. We need to move, Bethany urged, pulling clothes from her backpack. Can you walk? Scott nodded, standing shakily. Whatever questions or doubts he had, survival instinct was overriding them. He changed quickly into the jeans and sweatshirt Bethany had brought, movements becoming more coordinated by the minute. "I need 2 minutes at his computer," Chelsea whispered, already moving to the laptop on the desk. "1 minute," Bethany countered, helping Scott with his shoes. "Then we're gone." As Chelsea worked, fingers flying over the keyboard as she copied files, Scott's gaze fell on a framed photograph beside the bed, the only personal touch in the otherwise impersonal room. It showed a yacht against a sunset backdrop, the Eleanor painted on its hull. "Eleanor," he murmured, reaching for the frame. "My mother's name." Bethany's heart leapt. "Yes, Eleanor Miller. She died when you were 12. Scott's hands trembled as he held the photograph. "Cancer. She had breast cancer." His voice held wonder at the memory surfacing. "I stayed with her every night in the hospital." "Got it," Chelsea announced, pocketing the USB drive. Files, emails, everything. The three of them moved toward the door, but as Scott reached for the handle, he suddenly staggered, hand flying to his chest. His breathing became labored, face contorting in pain. "Nathan!" Bethany caught him as he swayed. "What's wrong?" "My heart," he gasped. "It's racing. Can't breathe properly." Bethany recognized the symptoms immediately. The same arrhythmia Alexa suffered from, the condition Nathan had managed his entire life. "Your medication, where is it?" Scott shook his head, confusion returning. Lauren handles all that." "Check the bathroom," Bethany instructed Chelsea. "Look for propranolol or metoprolol." As Chelsea darted to search the ensuite bathroom, Scott leaned heavily against Bethany, his breathing growing more strained. "Why do you know what I need?" he whispered. "Because I've been married to you for 18 years, Bethany answered, helping him to sit on the edge of the bed. "Because our daughter has the same heart condition. Because I know everything about you, Nathan." Scott's eyes locked with hers, something profound and searching in his gaze. For a moment, the fog seemed to lift entirely. "Bethany," he said, her name different on his lips this time. Intimate, familiar. "I know your voice. I hear it. In my dreams." The door burst open before Bethany could respond. She spun, expecting security guards, but instead found herself staring at her 8-year-old daughter. "Alexa," Bethany gasped. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you and Chelsea talking," Alexa explained, breathless from her apparent sprint through the mansion. "I made Mrs. Diaz bring me and Mark. He's with Elijah. You need to go back." "No," Alexa interrupted, moving forward with determination. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out an orange prescription bottle. "I brought my medicine. It's the same as his. I heard you tell Chelsea." Stunned, Bethany took the bottle. It was indeed Alexa's propranolol, the same medication Nathan had taken for years, as she helped Scott swallow one of the pills with water from the nightstand. Alexa approached him cautiously. "Are you really my dad?" she asked, her small voice filled with wonder. Scott stared at the child, something powerful working behind his eyes. I don't know," he admitted. Alexa's face fell, but only for a moment. Then, with childlike directness, she took his hand and placed it over her heart. "Feel that. It skips sometimes, then races. The doctor says we have the same thing. Mom says you taught me the special breathing when I was little, but I don't remember." Scott's eyes widened as he felt the distinctive, irregular rhythm of Alexa's heart, identical to his own. Something primitive and paternal flashed across his face. Without thinking, he demonstrated a breathing pattern, his hand still on her chest. "In for 4, he instructed automatically. "Hold for 7, out for 8. It helps regulate the rhythm." Alexa smiled triumphantly. "That's what you always used to say, Mom," he remembers. Scott looked up at Bethany, shock and recognition dawning simultaneously. "I do know this. I know her." His voice broke. "My daughter, our baby." The moment of connection was shattered by the sudden blare of an alarm. Red lights began flashing in the hallway, and the distant sound of running footsteps echoed through the house. "They've found us," Chelsea said, rushing back from the bathroom. "We need to go now." But Scott was already moving with newfound strength, sweeping Alexa into his arms. "This way," he said, leading them not toward the door but to a wall panel that slid open at his touch. "Service passage. It leads to the garage," as they hurried through the hidden corridor. Bethany marveled at the change in him. The connection with Alexa had bypassed whatever mental blocks remained. Not full memory restoration, but an instinctive recognition that went deeper than conscious thought. The body remembers what the mind forgets, Pastor Noah had said, and a father's connection to his child, it seemed, was stronger than any drug Lauren Anderson could administer. The narrow service passage plunged them into darkness, illuminated only by the flashlight on Chelsea's phone. Scott led them confidently, Alexa still cradled in his arms, moving with growing steadiness as the medication took effect, and adrenaline cleared the fog from his mind. "The security system will have alerted Lauren," he said over his shoulder. "We have maybe 10 minutes before she gets back from the clinic." "How do you know that?" Bethany asked, keeping close behind him. "I don't know how I know," he admitted. "It's just there, like muscle memory." The passage ended at a metal door that opened into the climate-controlled garage housing Scott's vehicle collection. 6 luxury cars gleamed under soft lighting, each worth more than Bethany would earn in a decade. "We need keys," Chelsea said, looking around frantically. Scott moved to a wall panel, punched in a code, and a drawer slid open, revealing several sets of keys. He grabbed one without hesitation. The SUV, least conspicuous. "Wait," Bethany said, pulling out her phone. "Mark, we need to get Mark." A text message appeared on her screen almost immediately. "Got the boy. Meeting you at the agreed location. Elijah." "They're safe," she breathed. "Elijah has Mark." As Scott helped Alexa into the black SUV, his movement suddenly froze. He stared at the child, something profound shifting in his expression. "Mark," he whispered, "named after my father, and Chelsea, after your grandmother." His gaze lifted to Bethany, eyes clearing with recognition. Alexa was a surprise. "You craved pineapple your entire pregnancy." Bethany's heart soared. "You're remembering fragments, like pieces of a dream." Scott pressed his palms to his temples. 8 years. They took 8 years from us. "We can talk about everything later," Chelsea urged, already in the back seat with her sister. "We need to move." Scott nodded, the momentary vulnerability replaced by determination. As they pulled out of the garage through a back exit, avoiding the main gates where security would be waiting, Bethany glanced at the man beside her. He drove with the same confident precision Nathan had always shown, his left hand gripping the wheel while his right moved instinctively to the gear shift, just as he'd always done. Night enveloped the coastal road as they wound their way toward the rendezvous point Bethany had arranged with Elijah, a small church overlooking the ocean, where Pastor Noah would be waiting. In the back seat, Chelsea maintained a watchful eye on the road behind them while Alexa dozed against her shoulder, exhausted by the night's events. "No one following yet," Chelsea reported, tension evident in her voice. "But they'll figure out which way we went soon enough. We ditched the obvious vehicle," Scott reasoned, "and they'll check your apartment first. We have time." Bethany studied his profile in the dim light from the dashboard. "You sound more like yourself every minute. I feel more like someone I'm supposed to be." He glanced at her. "Not fully Nathan, not really Scott anymore, but the medicine they've been giving me is wearing off. Memories are starting to connect." "What do you remember about the accident? About how you became Scott?" His brow furrowed in concentration. "I was testing the navigation system. Storm came up suddenly, then nothing clear. Just fragments. Pain, voices, Lauren standing over me." He shook his head. "I woke up in a private clinic. They told me I was Scott Anderson, that I'd been in a car accident after my cousin Jason's funeral, that the trauma had caused memory loss. And you believed them. I had nothing else to go on. No competing memories." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "But there were always inconsistencies, dreams I couldn't explain, skills I didn't remember learning, and the episodes, moments when something would trigger a feeling so strong it was physically painful. Like Mark's music at the gala. Yes." His voice softened. "I knew that melody in my bones. I knew it. And when I saw your face in the audience," he trailed off, struggling to articulate the complex emotions. "It was like seeing something I'd lost without knowing it was missing." They drove in silence for several minutes, the weight of 8 years of separation hanging between them. Finally, Scott spoke again, his voice heavy with realization. "They were using me. My engineering knowledge, my innovations, the navigation system. It was mine, wasn't it? Not Anderson Technology. Yes, Bethany confirmed. Chelsea found the patents. They were filed under Scott Anderson's name, but the preliminary work exactly matches papers you published before your disappearance. He laughed bitterly. I've been making them millions with my own inventions, never knowing they were stolen from myself. His eyes flashed with anger. And all this time, you and the children were struggling. We survived, Bethany said simply, unwilling to burden him with the hardships they'd endured. There would be time for those stories later. They reached the small stone church just as the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky. Pastor Noah waited on the steps, his lined face grave. Beside him stood Elijah, one hand on Mark's shoulder. The boy broke away the moment he spotted the SUV, running toward it as they parked. Bethany's heart clenched at the sight of her son. Safe and whole, Scott stepped out of the vehicle slowly, his eyes fixed on the approaching child. Mark skidded to a halt a few feet away, suddenly shy in the presence of the man he'd only known through photographs and stories. Mark, Scott said, his voice thick with emotion. The boy looked up at him, uncertainty written across his features. Are you really my dad? Scott knelt to the child's level, meeting his gaze directly. I think I am. I'm still remembering, but I think I am. Mark studied him for a long moment, then asked, Do you remember teaching me to whistle? Scott's brow furrowed, then suddenly cleared. The summer you turned 4, down by the lake, you couldn't get it right. Kept blowing raspberries instead. A smile touched his lips. Your mother was furious because I taught you to whistle the theme from Star Wars, and you wouldn't stop for weeks. Mark's face split into a wide grin. Mom said you'd remember if you tried hard enough. Inside the church's small office, Pastor Noah provided coffee while they gathered around a worn table, the children finally together in one place, Scott looking from face to face as if memorizing each feature. Lauren will come here, Elijah warned. Elijah, keeping watch at the window. It'll be the first place she checks once she realizes you've gone to Bethany. Let her come, Scott said, a steely edge to his voice. It's time to end this. Chelsea placed her laptop on the table, the USB drive already connected. I downloaded everything I could find. Financial records, emails, medical files. She pulled up a document, turning the screen toward Scott, including this. Lauren's plan to frame you for embezzlement after the memory procedure. Scott scanned the document, his face hardening. I suspected something was happening with the finances. Accounts I couldn't access, transactions I didn't authorize. He looked up at Bethany. There's more. Something I've been investigating privately for months. What do you mean? When the episodes started getting stronger, I began to doubt the story I'd been told. I hired a private investigator, someone outside Lauren's sphere of influence. He pulled out his phone, accessing a hidden folder. He delivered his final report last week. I am Nathan Miller. I didn't die in that boating accident. Lauren Anderson orchestrated my rescue and subsequent identity change. You've known for a week. Bethany stared at him, stunned. Why didn't you leave? Come find us. Because I needed to understand why. Scott, Nathan, held her gaze. And because I've been quietly transferring assets, setting up trusts in your names, preparing for what would happen after I confronted Lauren. You were protecting us, Chelsea realized, as best I could, without knowing who you were. A sad smile crossed his face. Even without my memories, some part of me was trying to make things right. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted them. Through the window, they watched as a sleek black car pulled up in front of the church. Lauren Anderson stepped out, followed by Dr. Whitman and 2 men who were clearly security rather than medical personnel. She's here, Elijah announced grimly. Nathan stood, straightening to his full height, the last traces of Scott Anderson's uncertainty falling away. Good. I have questions that need answers. She's dangerous, Bethany warned, moving protectively toward the children. So am I, Nathan replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence she remembered so well, especially now that I know what she's taken from me. He moved toward the door, then paused. Turning back to Bethany, with gentle hands, he cupped her face, studying her features as if seeing them clearly for the first time. I may not remember everything yet, he said softly, but I know this. I have loved you in 2 different lifetimes now, and I'm not losing you again. The kiss he pressed to her lips was brief, but filled with promise. The first step on the long road back to each other. Then, squaring his shoulders, Nathan Miller walked out to confront the woman who had stolen 8 years of his life. Nathan stood on the church steps, dawn light casting long shadows across the grounds. Lauren Anderson approached with measured steps, her silver hair immaculate despite the early hour, her expression a careful mask of concern. "Scott, darling," she called, voice honeyed with false warmth. "We've been so worried Dr. Whitman is concerned you've had a severe episode." "Hello, Lauren," Nathan replied calmly. "Or should I call you Lydia?" Lauren froze, the name hitting her like a physical blow. For a split second, genuine shock broke through her composed facade. "I don't know what nonsense these people have been filling your head with," she recovered smoothly. "But you're clearly disoriented. Let's get you home where Dr. Whitman can help you." "Lydia Miller," Nathan continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Born 12 minutes after Eleanor Miller. Given up for adoption at birth because your parents couldn't afford twins during the Depression." He took a step toward her. "That's who you really are, isn't it? My mother's sister." Lauren's eyes darted to the security men, a subtle signal passing between them. They began to flank out, moving to surround the church. "You're confused, Scott. These delusions—" "Stop!" Nathan's voice cut through her pretense. "The game is over, Lauren. I know who I am. I know who you are, and I know what you've done." Behind him, the church door opened. Bethany emerged. Followed by Pastor Noah, Elijah, and Jim Barrett, the children remained safely inside with Chelsea watching over Mark and Alexa. "Mrs. Anderson," Pastor Noah greeted her, his gentle voice somehow making the confrontation more solemn. "I believe it's time for confession." Lauren's composure cracked further, her eyes widening at the sight of the priest. "You have no right to involve yourself in family matters, Father." "Family is precisely why I'm involved," Noah replied. "This man's family has been broken for 8 years due to your actions." "Ridiculous. Scott has no family except you," Nathan finished. "My convenient mother-in-law who appeared out of nowhere to rescue me from my memory loss." He shook his head. "I hired an investigator, Lauren. He found hospital records from my accident, the treatments you authorized, the drugs Whitman prescribed, not to help me recover memories, but to suppress them." Lauren turned to Dr. Whitman, fury flashing across her face. "You kept records after everything I paid you." Whitman paled, inadvertently confirming Nathan's accusations with his reaction. "They were necessary for proper treatment protocols. No one was supposed to access them." "I found something else too," Nathan continued, his voice hardening. "Documents in Jason's old files. Proof that the navigation system that made Anderson Enterprises billions was actually stolen from my grandfather. Jason's father took the designs, filed patents under his own name, and left my family with nothing." Lauren's face transformed, cold calculation replaced by something darker, more primal. "Your precious grandfather was a fool who didn't understand what he had created. My adoptive father, Jason's father, was smart enough to see its potential." "So you admit it?" Bethany said, stepping forward to stand beside Nathan. "You knew all along." Lauren's gaze shifted to Bethany, contempt evident in every line of her face. "I found out after I married Jason. The company was already built on the technology by then." A bitter smile twisted her lips. "Imagine my surprise when I learned that the Miller family, the family that gave me away like unwanted baggage, had been cheated by the family that adopted me." "You could have made it right," Nathan said. "Instead, you doubled down on the theft." "I was protecting what was mine," Lauren snapped, her careful facade finally crumbling completely. "When Jason showed me your emails about the new navigation system, I recognized your name immediately. Eleanor Miller's son, my nephew, threatening everything we'd built. So you what? Had Jason arranged the accident?" Bethany demanded. Lauren's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Jason was weak. He wanted to negotiate, to offer you a partnership." Her voice dripped with disdain. "He didn't understand that Millers don't deserve partnerships. They deserve nothing." "What happened on the boat, Lauren?" Nathan pressed for a moment. It seemed she wouldn't answer. Then, with a shrug that suggested the past no longer mattered, she said, "Jason sent men to convince you to sell your prototype. Things got physical. The storm made everything worse. They reported you were dead, washed overboard. But I wasn't. No. Local fishermen found you, barely alive. They worked for me. Recognized you from photos Jason had shown them. A cold smile touched her lips. When I saw you in that hospital bed, unconscious, head trauma causing complete amnesia according to the doctors, it was like fate had handed me a gift. A gift. Bethany's voice shook with rage. His life was a gift to you. Lauren ignored her, eyes fixed on Nathan. I gave you purpose. I molded you into someone successful, powerful. Scott Anderson accomplished more in 7 years than Nathan Miller would have in a lifetime. You stole him from his family, Bethany said, stepping closer. His children grew up without their father. I mourned my husband for 8 years while you used him like a puppet. Collateral damage, Lauren dismissed. Besides, look at what he became under my guidance. Nathan Miller was a nobody. Scott Anderson is a titan of industry. Nathan shook his head, a mixture of pity and disgust in his expression. You still don't understand, do you? Everything Scott Anderson accomplished was because of Nathan Miller's mind. His creativity, his skills. You didn't create someone better. You just stole the fruits of my labor. Again, Lauren's face hardened. She gestured sharply to her security men. This has gone on long enough. Scott needs medical attention. Restrain them if necessary. The men moved forward, but Jim Barrett stepped between them and Nathan's family, his security uniform a matching counterpoint to theirs. Stand down, he ordered. You don't want to do this. You're fired, Barrett. Lauren spat. Actually, he's not, Nathan countered. As of last week, I'm the majority shareholder of Anderson Enterprises. I've been quietly buying back controlling interest through shell companies for months. Lauren paled. That's impossible. The board is meeting this afternoon to review evidence of your financial mismanagement and criminal manipulation. Nathan pulled out his phone, showing her documents on the screen, including your plan to frame me for embezzlement after erasing my memories permanently. The security men exchanged uncertain glances, clearly reassessing their position in this rapidly changing power dynamic. It's over, Lauren, Nathan said quietly. The question is, how do you want it to end? Lauren's eyes darted between the faces surrounding her, calculating options that were rapidly dwindling. What are you offering? She finally asked. The pragmatic businesswoman emerging even in defeat. 2 choices, Nathan replied. I can have you arrested. Fraud, kidnapping, attempted murder, criminal conspiracy. The evidence is overwhelming. Or you can use your considerable talents for something better. He gestured to Pastor Noah. Father has a proposition. Noah stepped forward. Mrs. Anderson, your actions have been driven by pain. The pain of abandonment. Of feeling unwanted. I propose you channel that understanding into helping others. We have a foundation that reunites separated families, particularly children who were given up for adoption with parents who regretted that choice. Charity work, Lauren scoffed. As my punishment, as your redemption, Noah corrected gently. Your sister, Nathan's mother, spent years searching for you. She died still hoping to find her twin. Something flickered in Lauren's eyes, a brief, unguarded moment of genuine emotion. She looked for me. There are letters, Nathan said. My investigator found them in my grandmother's effects. Eleanor never stopped trying to find you. For the first time, Lauren seemed truly shaken. She looked away, composing herself, then back at Nathan with eyes that had lost some of their steely determination. And if I choose this, foundation work, you'll retain a modest income from a trust. No criminal charges, but you'll never contact me or my family again. Nathan's voice was firm but not cruel. Your choice, Lauren, prison, or purpose. Lauren looked past him to the church door, where Chelsea now stood with Mark and Alexa beside her. Her gaze lingered on the children, the family she had torn apart, the generation that should have been her own flesh and blood. I choose the foundation, she said finally, her voice stripped of its usual imperious tone. As Elijah escorted Lauren and Dr. Whitman away to finalize arrangements, Nathan turned to Bethany and their children. The first true rays of morning sunlight broke over the church, illuminating their faces. I still don't remember everything, he admitted, reaching for Bethany's hand. There are gaps, shadows, parts of myself I might never fully recover. We'll help you, Chelsea said, stepping forward with her siblings. "We have photos, videos, stories." Mark nodded eagerly. "I can teach you all the secret handshakes we made up before you were gone. And I can show you the special breathing exercises you taught me," Alexa added, slipping her small hand into his. Nathan knelt down, drawing all 3 children into his embrace over their heads. His eyes met Bethany's, filled with promise and gratitude. "Even when I didn't know who I was," he told her, echoing words from their wedding day that were now finding their way back to him. "My heart never forgot you. In every dream, in every song that moved me without reason, it was you I was searching for." Bethany joined the embrace, completing the circle of their family. "Welcome home, Nathan," she whispered against his ear. "Welcome home." On the church steps, bathed in the light of a new day, the Miller family began the journey of healing, not erasing the past, but building a future on the foundation of a love that had proven stronger than even the most elaborate deception. After 8 years of shadows, they stepped together into the light,